All right, so I guess we could start with introductions. My name is Brady. I am a sophomore accounting major, and I'm from Montgomery, Texas, which is like an hour away from here.
I'm Prisha Gupta. I'm a freshman psych major and I'm from DFW, like Frisco area.
I'm
I'm
Shri.
Redley.
I'm a freshman engineering major and I'm from Katy, Texas.
I'm Redley. I'm a senior political science major. I'm from Port Lavaca. It's about 3 hours south of here.
I'm Murphy Angel. I'm a junior in urban planning. Right.
All right, cool. So, all right, I just want to make sure. Does it tell y'all that I'm recording? Like it says at the top, right? All right, cool.
It popped up for me. Yeah.
All right, so first discussion point was what are examples of lithosphere change that we can observe in the local environment?
I know around the pond that we're looking for is you kind of see it where if we're like constantly moving on like the grass over by like Haney, which is by the Southside Garage, stuff like that, you can kind of see that the grass kind of like fades away, and then over time that like soil that was there just becomes kind of sand. So you can say that's kind of a local change of like because of our actions. And it's a very small scale.
Another lithosphere change is like deforestation and logging because that can increase erosion and also like ruins native ecosystems.
Yeah, that's true. Like this whole place used to be a forest for the schools here. So
One thing you do see is kind of like naturally, like everywhere. It's like not just here, but like one of the major, there's like three driving forces in like changes to the lithosphere, and it's like weathering, erosion, stuff like that, and stuff that causes that's like rain and wind, and that especially here with wind, it's extremely windy in College Station, literally all the time, and I mean, wind just causes things to erode and soil to like blow away, and then rain will just change landscapes. Like you see all the time, like when there's like heavy storms, it can like cause like roads to fall apart. Like if it's like it's over like kind of like lifted above the land, like part of the road will slide off just because of heavy rain. So it's just rain and wind can cause major changes to the lithosphere alone. And that's not just here, that's everywhere.
yeah, I'm sure wind is especially pretty bad here just because of they got all like that farmland just pretty much everywhere around
Mm-hmm.
College Station, and they don't have any crops on there. In between those growing seasons, that heavy wind comes and just starts pushing more and more of that soil away.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
also a
like
lot of
wind
human
is
activity. Sorry. Yeah, there's also a lot of human activity that could affect it, like quarrying or mining and fracking or drilling. So things that humans could do to the earth that could change it.
Yeah, I was gonna say mining, like that's very human driven and that changes like the natural rock layers and like soil and also like affects the topography a lot, which affects the lithosphere.
Yeah, I didn't know about like how bad I knew like fracking wasn't great for the environment, but I didn't realize until this module that like it could cause earthquakes and stuff underneath. Because I feel like that's really downplayed a lot. A lot of people just don't realize that. Because like when I was a freshman, I took an engineering class and they had some guy come in who was a petroleum engineer, and he was he worked for one of the oil companies, and he was talking about how what he does is he makes some of the stuff that they use for fracking, and he was like pointing it down, it's just fracking, everybody gets all up in arms about it, but all it is we just pump a little bit of water and sand into the earth, and that's it. There's already water and sand down there. People just downplay it like that, and then a few years later find out like, yeah, that stuff's causing earthquakes and everything. So
Yep.
I mean, a big example of that is if you go to Oklahoma, where like some of that oil is, they got really bad earthquake problems now just because of the constantly shoving water and sand down there, and that's kind of because you're semi replacing that like oil layer in the lithosphere with water, and so it contracts and expands more. I think I can't remember exactly. It's because of that. It shifts the water table and stuff. Causes more shifts.
Yeah.
They're right.
And I think there was another thing that was like a part of this module that had to do with extracting like oil and water from the ground, earthquakes, but also like sinkholes. I think it was called like ground subsidence or something like that. It's like
Yeah.
taking too much, not even just water, oil, just materials from beneath the ground can cause the ground to just sink. I mean, that's a major change to lithosphere, but it's also extremely dangerous because, this stuff happens everywhere. So big dangerous to the environment.
It's true.
I guess another change, it's not too local here, more local from where I'm from on the coast. There's a lot of dredging that goes on, and it talked about like having jetties and stuff to try and prevent some of that erosion, and they definitely do a lot of that on the coast. You go down, especially where there's plants and stuff, you'll see like those huge channels. There's one, do y'all know where Victoria's at?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody? Yeah, well, they have a barge canal. It goes all the way from Victoria, it goes up past Victoria
Yeah.
and miles down, all the way to the coast, completely, dredged out. And
Yeah,
it's a pretty big change.
yeah.
You can see it's super steep. They've
Mm-hmm.
got it like lined up with, cement blocks to try and prevent some of that erosion, but they can't prevent all of it. It still happens.
Yeah. That the intercoastal, I think, is what you're talking about. It
Yeah,
like it goes
intercoastal.
all because I go fishing a lot down in Galveston Bay, and we'll go through the intercoastal where all the barges and big ships
Yeah.
come through that channel. And like every once in a while, we'll go out to the jetties, which is something that's meant to like stop big waves from crashing. Like it's supposed to help the ships go through. And I mean, if you, especially in Galveston, the seawall, that's another thing. Seawalls are built to protect the coasts. And one thing, because I'm writing my paper about like coast geomorpho, I don't know how to pronounce the word, but like changes to like the coast. And one of the things was like seawalls being built. Although it does help the immediate area where the seawall is, there's like downstream effects. Like at the end of the seawall where the water is diverted to, there's like heavy erosion in those areas because all of that water is getting deflected there and it's much more like aggressive when it gets there.
Yeah, you can definitely see that, down by the jetties on the coast. Like they'll have that long line of jetties, and the backside of it, all that nice pretty beaches is all protected, and then you get to the end of
Yeah.
it, and it's like just real slick, and you can just tell where everything's just getting carried away.
Yeah. I guess that could play into the next point if y'all want. What were we gonna say? Sorry.
Mention of that jetty thing is also with when they do canal management and stuff like that, you have to worry about the water flow because a lot of times when you change it to like a concrete bedding or stuff like that, you can actually increase the water flow, which increases that erosion.
Yeah, one more thing about the dredging too is just like those pipes and stuff. Whenever they're not dredging with them, at least down in Calhoun, uh, land that people think was a public land. People used to go fishing down there and stuff. They just let them just dump all them pipes like on a shoreline, just so they have easy access for it next time they're going to use them. But it's like just more area just getting taken up. It's more land destruction, I guess. It like they'll chop down a bunch of vegetation to clear it up just so they have easy access for it. So
Yeah.
it's more than just like the weather effects.
And yeah, like dredging, not only like you're moving sediment to like a different spot, but like they're completely changing the ocean floor
Yeah.
where they're doing the dredging at, which is like not only changing the lithosphere, but also like that has a major effect on marine life and like their habitat. So really,
And
it's
that can
not
bring
just
more erosion, when the
yeah,
animals habitats start getting messed up, mess up the oyster reefs and then mess up the fish
yeah,
habitat.
I think that could be
It's almost
comparable to deforestation in certain areas, like a lot of the logging that happens in the Amazon rainforest, which exposes the soil to erosion and like major changes in the land structure. Sometimes it can like, or in certain like more not exactly forests, but in like certain parts of Canada or even in Utah, fracking or mining created like holes, like craters in the land. So like moving around soil and stuff like that could like really affect the land.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second question was compare anthropogenic change to natural change.
I mean, there's like for that question, there's so many differences between the two. Like anthropogenic is human caused, and the natural is obviously like natural. Like anthropogenic is mainly driven by economic and social needs, which is why humans change a lot of what they change. While natural change is like weathering, erosion, climate. Like examples could be like earthquakes, landslides, erosion, things like that. And then another difference between them two is that natural change, I feel like, occurs slower, and anthropogenic change occurs rapidly and also more permanently because human change has long-term impacts that takes a lot to go back to its original form, while natural changes go slowly and can be reverted back slowly, kind of.
I mean, I think you're right, but at the same time, I don't, because I think they're both irreversible, and we've seen this with like the Sahara. If you don't know, Sahara used to be like a grasslands area. It's a desert now. There's a very little chance, even if we kept by like natural processes, that it would come back into a grasslands for like another thousands of years, and by that point, it would be tectonic shifts and all that kind of stuff. Another example is Antarctica. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think you're right though. With the human change is a lot faster, and it's more on our own terms than natural is more of a present, already there change.
Yeah, going off what you said about the human change being more on our own terms, I think that anthropogenic change can, like, it's easier to regulate it or mitigate solutions when there's problems rather compared to natural changes, which, you know, that's just whatever the weather, whether the climate is like, or whatever natural changes are happening, it's harder for us to have control over that.
One thing that I think Prisha said about like human change, I feel like urban natural change is long term. One way you could think of the like lithosphere changes is like the tectonic plates and like the movement of tectonic plates. Over time, you'll have mountain ranges form and faults created, and I mean that's major changes to the lithosphere, but that it takes thousands of years to occur. So natural changes, yes, they take a very long time. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with like anthropogenic or like human caused, one of the things was talked about in the module is like there's like deliberate and then there's non-deliberate. So like there's human caused that is on purpose, and then there's human caused that are like by accident. And one of the things was non-deliberate was like it was landslides. And I think what they were talking about in the it was, let me see, it was like removal of trees and that stuff like that can cause landslides to happen. And it's not we're not deliberately doing it, but it's a major change to, the surface of the land. So,
I mean, I get that, but I would still have to disagree because at the end of the day, it's still kind of on our own terms because it's like a cause and effect, right? Where it's like we removed these trees because we didn't want them, and then we didn't think ahead, and so now we got a landslide. So I feel like it's
yeah.
still like sure it's on accident, but it's still on our terms because it was what we did that caused that.
Yeah.
Oh,
See, I'm trying to find where I wrote about it. Yeah, it was like accelerated mass movements can be triggered by humans. They're rarely deliberate, they're mostly accidental. So, like, let me see, as a result of slope instability, that can be categorized into two types: disturbing and resisting. So like removing lateral or underlying support. So like I get what you're saying. Like we do it and like we don't think of what it's going to cause in the future. But I think what it was meant by deliberate and like non-deliberate was like they're not purposely doing it to like make this change, because like I guess when you think of deliberate, you like be construction. Like if you're like leveling land, you're deliberately changing the lithosphere to like
There's
build land
a
on it.
purpose to it.
Yeah. But like
Yeah.
if you're like in this case, you're not deliberately trying to cause a landslide. So, but I get what you're saying.
I was trying to say like overall, but I do understand that in this case, like because you have like the cause, which is more like us doing it actively, and that effect, which is more of that passive, accidental cause.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Because like with that landslide, like you said, for example, is that trees they get cut down by that slope, so the slope's weakened, and so it slides. Well, we still cut down the trees. That was the
Yeah.
purposeful point, but it did lead to an accidental later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also agree. Like with your scenario with the landslide, like that's accidental. But in most anthropogenic changes, I feel like humans do what they do knowing what's gonna happen. Not like deforestation, for example. They cut all the trees down to either use it for wood, like things like that. But they know they're also taking homes away from ecosystems and you causing erosion and like all these things. So like in both senses, like we know what we're doing, but we don't mean to actually hurt other people. We're just wanting to take care of like our own society, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Another interesting anthropogenic one was it was like construction and dumping, which was the dumping part. It was like constructing mounds out of like debris and like creating dry land from it, which I thought was I don't like I've probably seen one before, but I can't really think of like seeing a mound out of debris.
Well,
But I can see like it changes the surface.
one of those examples could be those like trash mounds. What they do a lot of times is when they want like artificial hills or something like that, they actually put trash underneath it and then put
Mhm.
topsoil around it to make like a hill.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the examples.
I
But then
think
It's
there's
weird to
also
think about.
times
I think another one that you're talking about was in the one of the videos. It was made by like Native Americans, right? That mound
Might have
or
been.
Serpent Mound, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I know what
Serpent
you're
Mound
talking
was
about. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess there's some like that are like human made type mounds and stuff, but uh I guess they're not really like for like a no, they don't really have like a practical function. Like we have dams and stuff. We're trying to get something out of it, block the water, make power, whatever. But then some of that stuff it's like I guess cultural, like like the Native American mounds, that doesn't really have like a purpose for it other than like cultural things. And then we still do it today, like whenever we'll like Mount Rushmore, I guess just straight carving into the rock, completely changing the
Mhm.
face of the earth, just for
yeah.
not really a practical reason. But I mean, not that it's
another
like a bad thing, I guess. Like, if it doesn't harm the environment, it's not really
Yeah.
an issue.
another big example of your like moving stuff around. I mean, this is more water, but it's also a little bit of land. Is the Dutch, where literally just like moving stuff into the lowlands, so they can either rise their own like sea level, or sorry, lower their own sea level, and raise their own elevation, or the other way around. Basically, micromanaging where the sea can either enter or not. And they've been doing it for like literal centuries. Uh, just an interesting example.
Huh. Never thought
Governmental
of that.
project of moving land and managing where water's coming in and out, where land is going in and out, erosion, all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting.
Another interesting anthropogenic change is like land leveling and rock blasting to build highways or any sort of roads, just to clear roads up to build certain infrastructure. It's done in like Los Angeles, and it's even used for like open pit mining in Canada, and that's what created that like huge crater basically and altered the landscape pretty permanently. So it was like a pretty irreversible change from the effects of it.
Have we talked about like mines yet?
I think
We talked a
lightly.
little bit, yeah, like how it like
Open
can
pit mines and
cause.
stuff.
We haven't talked about open pit mines.
Those things are massive amount of resources.
Mhm.
I will like we touched on how like mining can cause like ground subsidence and like sinkholes due to like you're removing materials from underneath the ground, and that just gravity will eventually cause the land to fall and cause a sinkhole. But they one of the also the thing about dumping they mentioned in the video is like the waste that they'll have when mining. They'll also use that in these like mounds that they'll build. So mining does have a major effect on the lithosphere. So
I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
where
I
you
guess
literally
that's
are
true.
just
Like
digging
when
it
you
out.
think of mining, it's like
yeah.
mostly just the dirt that comes out of the earth, and how it can cause a sinkhole, but all that dirt's got to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're literally just putting a hole in there and then going, what do we do with this excess stuff?
Yeah. All right. And then there's another question. Which environments are the most affected by the lithosphere changes?
I mean,
I
definitely one
would
of the main
say,
ones is like urban areas because they're just under constant development no matter the time of the year, whether it's building highways, tearing down houses, building new buildings, tearing down buildings, building new roads. Like all these things are under constant development and they're always expanding, which is ruining other land and ecosystems around them. Like I know in DFW, we have, like in Frisco, we have 14 high schools for one area. So that's a lot of land just being torn down for extra schools. And the housing is, and then you're creating more houses and you're just tearing down like acres of land, of forests, of trees and ecosystems for that. And it's like constantly like all year round.
Also the changing culture of like just having one community of people, like one community of houses built will affect so much of the land around it to build like grocery stores, schools, and like so much other infrastructure that could stem off from one community. So like
Mhm.
or that it's like exponentially grows. So yeah,
And there's
like
like,
areas would be the most affected.
and it's like a domino effect because like you're creating more schools, that creates more housing, that creates more roads, that creates more grocery stores, which creates more people using cars, which is pollution. So it's like just a domino effect of consequences for their environment the more it grows.
I guess
yeah,
building on that a little bit, with it being urban areas, I'd say maybe coastal urban areas a little more just because they have all the problems of an inland thing, the deforestation and everything, and then they also
no,
got to
no.
deal with like the water erosion, having to build jetties and all that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. EST is not over. It's not 22.
And then like you also have so like we talked about earlier with like seawalls and like how downstream from a seawall there's more erosion and you touched on how they coastal communities have to deal with all the normal changes that an inland community would deal with, but they also have to deal with the erosion that comes from water waves pushing up on land, eroding away the land, seawalls, what happens downstream from seawalls. So I feel like coastal communities and especially like in the ocean, like the habitats in the ocean are affected, like from dredging and activities we do to change the surface of the ocean. So I feel like coastal and ocean environments are, they have there's a major effect on them too.
I would say like sure urban planning or sorry, urban communities are affected, but I would say it's more of the natural like forestry, stuff like that. Because not only are those places usually large carbon sinks and direct contributors to like stopping lithosphere like movements such as topsoil erosion and stuff like that, we're also heavily affecting them by like cutting them down. I mean, there's a reason why for in the Sahel they're doing like a whole green belt of literally just forests because they're known to, I mean, essentially just being the workforce of the environmental system. And yeah, so uh, I'm gonna have to go. So,
It's all
I should
good.
see you later.
See ya.
Yeah.
All right. And then I guess one other environment I could touch on is like it's like especially when I drive, to and from home to here, there's a lot of like agriculture land, like it's a lot of farmland. And one thing that the modules also touched on was about like overgrazing and, you know, flattening of the land and how it can like expose soil and cause soil to erode away from like wind and stuff like that. And there, I mean, when I drive here, it is just an hour of just straight farmland. So, you know, areas like that are can be heavily affected by, you know, changes due to like overgrazing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I took a class a couple semesters ago, and it went into I don't remember what it was called, but it was mostly about like animals grazing and stuff like the effect on the environment, livestock, and I didn't realize how much science really went into that, trying to, you know, have the right amount of cows, not just having, you know, the right amount of livestock on an area, but having the right type of vegetation, make sure the soil's all right, and trying to prevent, you know, erosion from that, not having them overeat. Like it's
Yeah.
a lot of science that goes into that.
I think also mountainous regions are a type that can be really affected by that. Especially by rain, because things like landslides and slope failure, road cutting, those all could be affected by like the slope that the mountains are on. So like the monsoon season during the monsoon season, the Himalayas and Andes experience a lot of landslides because of the erosion that the water causes. So I think like the fact that they're already on an incline is something that really affects the lithosphere change in mountainous regions.
I would also say areas with heavy mining. You know, we've touched on it a lot. You know, where a lot of mining, not even just mining, oil extraction. You know, which is like very prevalent in Texas. And you know, these areas could be affected. Ground subsidence, like we talked about earlier, which I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but you know, they're in danger of it happening due to how much oil is constantly being, you know, extracted from the ground.
And it's only going to get
So
worse too.
yeah, it's keeps on growing in Texas. It's everywhere. But and I wouldn't even just say I would honestly say everywhere is affected by, you know, these like everywhere has the earth is constantly changing, so I wouldn't just pin it to one area, one environment that's being, you know, changed. But we have like 2 minutes left. We gotta find we could like maybe try what are y'all like writing y'all's papers about? If
I
y'all
wrote
even
about
figure.
the Colorado River Delta, how like um the water is getting drained by the time it even reaches a formed body. So like all the ecosystems are like there's no wildlife left and how we should let the water naturally do its thing.
That's good.
I think that's the look for my topic. So
Yeah. I just started looking and I was like trying to figure it out. I think I'm writing mine about like building like jetties and seawalls and the like normal structures that are built along the coasts and you know how it affects, you know, not just the immediate coast but also like downstream like I was saying earlier, and like if it's like necessary to keep on building them or if it would be, you know, helpful if we like cut it down a little bit. But I got to do a little more research.
That's probably what I'm gonna end up writing about too. Something that has to do with the coastal region. I'm not exactly sure, but
Yeah.
there's a lot
Like
to write about with that.
Mhm.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel
Especially
like touch
fishing.
on mining. Yeah.
Yeah, mining and like especially like fishing in Galveston all the time. It's
Mhm.
kind of easy to see what like cuz I go down to Galveston a lot. It's easy to see how this stuff affects, you know, the coast cuz we go out and fish at the jetties all the time, and it's like it's really cool to go out there and see like the effect it has on each side of the jetty because there's a bunch of jetties too. It's not just one. So like going out there and seeing the changes, it's pretty cool. So yeah, we're like right at 30 minutes, so
Okay.
we're probably good there. So
You should be
Perfect.
good.
it's good.
Mm.
I'll send y'all the link when I have it uploaded. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Eh.
Y'all take it easy.
Bye.
You too.